by the team here. So if you miss something and you want to go back and review it, you will have that opportunity to do so. I'm not sure how long they're sharing it for, but there's usually a limited time period. So check with your team about that to see how long it's going to be up. So today we're going to be talking about emotional and as I was saying, looking at the number of people who've joined us today, 100 participants, I think emotional dysregulation and having a lot of intense emotions seems to be really front and center these days, and no doubt because of the circumstances that we're all living under. But I like this slide, this first picture, because that's somehow what big emotions feel like to me, is big waves coming in. And sometimes you can feel really bashed around by those big emotions. But hopefully by the end of today, you'll feel like you have one more tool in your toolbox to help you with helping people who are experiencing some of those intense emotions. So like the Rosie the Riveter picture today, dealing with emotions is actually quite tough. It requires a lot of skill and energy, and it can be draining at times, but I know you guys can do this. So here's a quick rundown of the agenda of what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to start off talking about the origins of this approach and where it came from, because I did not create it, but I was taught it. We're going to go through some of the basic brain science of emotions. So what is actually happening in the brain when somebody is flooded with an intense emotion? And then we're going to move into this idea of emotion coaching as a way to help people calm down from a big emotion. We're going to talk a little bit about our own common responses to emotions. And so it's really important to kind of understand your own go-to or knee-jerk responses and look at those a little bit, because the more you know about yourself, the more you will be able to do this work and help other people. So this process I'm going to teach you today only has 2 steps. And that's why I love it, because it's really easy to remember 2 steps, even in the middle of something quite chaotic. So step 1 is validating, and we have a very specific validation script, which I will teach you. And then we're going to have some examples that we're all going to work on together. And that's when I'm going to ask you to type into the chat sort of what you might say. And we're going to talk about step 2, which is offering support, and how the step 1 has to come before step 2. We're going to talk a little bit about dealing with adults' emotions. You can use exactly the same technique with adults. And we all know now, because of COVID and because of the circumstances that we're living under, that it's not just children that are experiencing these big tsunamis and waves. It's all of us. So this will be helpful for you working with colleagues, working with parents. You can also use it on your spouse or your partner, your neighbors. It's a really multi-use tool. We'll have time for some questions, obviously. And then I'm going to try to put you guys into breakout rooms. I'm assuming I can do 50 breakout rooms. We'll see. Because I want you to experience this and to feel what it feels like receiving and giving this very specific validation script. So hopefully we'll have time to do that, and then we'll have more questions, and I'll leave you with some links and some other resources so you can continue to practice this and apply it in your life. So a few thoughts before we get started. My husband is a teacher. He teaches high school in Stony Plain. This is not a picture of him, but this is what he feels like some days as a teacher. So I just want to start out by acknowledging that being in the classroom has always been difficult and challenging work, but it's gotten increasingly challenging as the classrooms have become more and more diverse, and the needs of the students have become more and more diverse. And then, of course, add on top of that everything you guys have been going through for the last 18 months, 2 years with COVID. So this is tough. What you're doing is tough. And if you're feeling burnt out and stressed and overwhelmed and fed up, that's completely understandable and normal. So I don't want today to feel like, one more thing I have to do, or one more thing I have to learn, one more useless PD session. I'm hoping that you'll find it really applicable and relevant to your life, and that it'll build upon what you already know. So this is not about throwing out whatever training you've already had and all the other PD that you've done, which is, I'm sure, been wonderful. It's just one more thing. So take it and use it as it works for you, and forget about whatever stuff doesn't make any sense to you. Hopefully most of it today will make a lot of sense. So a little bit about us before I get started. I always say us, even though it's only ever me up here, because I wouldn't be doing this work without Dr. Adele LaFrance. So Adele has her PhD in clinical and child psychology, and she's the co-founder of Mental Health Foundations, which is an amazing charity and website, which I will give you the link to at the end. She co-developed emotion-focused family therapy particularly for children with eating disorders. And but she also did a lot of other work with a lot of other disorders and things. And she went into schools and worked with students there. So she had over 10 years experience working as a child psychologist in schools. And it was from there that she learned how interacting with teachers and EAs, that she adapted her emotion-focused family therapy into this really compact, easy to understand emotion coaching in the classroom technique. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today, is that technique that's developed specifically for the classroom. So a little bit about me. I am the former executive director of the Eating Disorder Support Network of Alberta, which is a charity dedicated to helping families and individuals affected by eating disorders. And that's how I met Dr. LaFrance. More recently, I've been working for the Canadian Mental Health Association here in Edmonton. And right now I have a private practice as a family peer support worker. So I support parents of kids with mental health issues or substance use issues and coach them through that very tricky journey as a parent. I was trained in emotion-focused family therapy by Adele, and also trained in mediation and conflict resolution and restorative justice. But for me, this technique that I'm going to share with you today has been the most transformative thing, the most useful tool that I've ever learned. And I used it very consistently with our daughter, who was diagnosed with anorexia, and it transformed our interactions. And really, I think was a huge part of her recovery, was me learning this skill. So that's why I'm so passionate about it, was because I used it over and over again and saw the huge difference that it made. So as I said, Adele adapted and created this approach specifically for use in the classroom because she heard from teachers and EAs and principals and administrators that they were really struggling to respond to this emotional dysregulation in some kids. The typical way of responding wasn't working. And they were feeling really frustrated and didn't know what to do and didn't know how to help these kids. They really wanted something that was brief. They didn't want to have to stop the world, for a 35-minute therapy session. They wanted a quick strategy that they could use in the classroom that would really support the kid coming back into the learning environment. So being able to get out of that heightened state and come back in and resume learning. And they didn't want to have to go away for 5 months to learn it. They wanted it to be quick and easy and applicable right away. She also heard from the teachers that they were the stress of some of these interactions that were not going well, in particular with parents, were causing the teachers and the EAs to feel an enormous amount of burnout. And they were taking it home with them on the evenings and weekends, and it was starting to really weigh them down, and they were going over it again in their heads. And it was making them have a lot less joy in their jobs, and some of them were thinking about leaving because of it. So the stress on the staff was really significant. So she really wanted to create this to help out in the classroom. All right, so get your fingers ready. We're going to do a little bit of the chat interaction piece right now. So Let's look at the situation where there's a child, they're crying. They say, I'm a loser. Nobody likes me. And I want you to type into the chat, what is your first impulse to respond to that child? What are some of the things that you feel like saying? Hey, no way, right? What else? You're absolutely not a loser. No, you're not. You're awesome, right? You're loved, but I like you, right? Yeah, you've got a lot going for you. You're awesome. You're not a loser. Everyone is unique. What makes you think that? What makes you say that? What's going on? What happened? What happened? Yeah, yeah. Questions. Tell me more. What makes you say that? Awesome. Yeah. So questions, and also trying to reassure them, right? That that's not true, that that's not the case. Exactly. These are the typical things that people say. My slide is not advancing. Just hang on a sec here. it's deciding it wants to be cranky. So why do we respond this way? Well, most teachers, I'd say EAs, administrators, anybody in education actually, are fixers, the people who like to fix things and they care, right? So when we see a child that's in pain, we want to free them from that pain. We want to get them out of that pain as quickly as possible, because their emotional pain causes us emotional pain, especially if it's a kid you really like. So, you feel bad, or maybe it reminds you of a time when you felt like that. And so other people's pain causes us pain, and we don't like that either. Sometimes we don't know what else to say, and we don't want to make it worse. So we're trying to kind of get around this emotion as quickly as possible. Sometimes, though, we don't agree or understand the pain, and so we might dismiss it. So, for instance, if you have a child that, they break their pencil and they just, immediately erupt into tears about this is their favorite pencil and now it's broken. And you're like, oh, it's just a 2B pencil. Here, have another one. It's exactly the same. Can we just get on with things? We've got a lot of work to do here. So sometimes an emotional response is something that we don't really relate to, but mostly we respond the way we do to other people's emotional pain because we were never taught how to respond. And in particular, the difficult emotions like vulnerability or grief or loss, anxiety, those ones that are really tricky, we weren't taught how to respond. And our parents weren't taught how to respond. And you can be sure that their parents also were not taught how to respond. So how would we know, right? There's some other things that also can hold us back from really being comfortable with other people's emotion and responding with it easily. Things like historical events. So if you grew up in a time and a place where emotions weren't really convenient, or they weren't really polite, or it was all stiff upper lip or be tough, right? So you could have like a societal expectation, a cultural expectation, a gender expectation, right? Differences between how men and women are taught to deal with emotions, but also historical things. So in my family situation, my mother grew up in London during the Blitz. So the bombs were landing on the houses. And in fact, a bomb landed very near to her house. And at that moment, it was very much get up and go, right? There was no time for crying and about, oh, my lost dollies, right? It was just, we got to get out of here. So those things can really influence how you think it's appropriate to respond. We can have intergenerational patterns of avoidance. So if your parents were very buttoned down and didn't really engage with emotion a lot, then you probably picked up that might be the right way to behave, and you might carry that on, right? And we can see now, even in the media, that emotional avoidance is celebrated, right? So you have the tough guy icon, and now you have the tough woman icon who don't really experience a lot of emotions, but they just push through things. And yet we know that emotions are really, really important, right? They exist to help us get what we need. They really are fundamental to who we are as human beings. If you strip away all emotion, you're not really considered much of a human anymore, right? So it's a really important thing that's basic to us, and that it is actually very much linked to health. So if you are able to express and process emotions healthily, then your body releases the right kinds of chemicals. If you are suppressing emotions and keeping things down or expressing emotions in unhealthy ways, other chemicals are released. So it's very biological, and it's primary in the sense that it's there from the second you're born. So we all know that with newborn babies, that they're excellent emotional communicators because it's their only way of communicating. And unfortunately, some of us lose that as we get older. So you can think of them as very important signals, or like a flare going up in the night saying, hey, there's something here that you need to pay attention to. So we really need to learn how to attend to emotions and help them follow their course naturally so they can be processed properly. So I want you to think of the last time that you had to deal with a really challenging emotion in someone else. So it might be one of your students, or might be one of your own children, or it might be your spouse or coworker, whatever. And I want you to just remember that time when they were really upset about something. And I want you to think about how much disruption and stress that caused to them, obviously, to you, and to any other bystanders that might have been around. So if it was in a classroom, how did the ripples affect all of the other students in the class, right? And how long did it take everybody who was affected to kind of come back to normal or baseline? Might have been a number of minutes, might have been hours. Sometimes these things can go on for much longer, where you're sort of ruminating on it and it's still affecting you maybe days later, right? How much did you replay it in your mind afterwards and think, oh, I should have, or I could have, or why didn't I, or why did they, or they should have, or they shouldn't have, right? How much time was spent in all of that? So when you start to think about how much time these emotions take up, it's much more than just the 2 or 3 minutes of the incident. They often can bleed out into a lot. And that's why learning this method, which helps them move through the emotion in about 2 to 3 minutes, is really actually quite time effective. If that's one of your things about good management of time. But as you're thinking about that person and that instance and that time, I want you to also expand your mind to think about all the different types of people that struggle with emotional dysregulation. So we know that anybody who's learning something new is probably going to be frustrated because it's not going to go perfectly and there's going to be some setbacks. And so that can be a time of emotional dysregulation for anybody. Children, obviously, who are struggling in school, they can develop a sense of learned helplessness or a negative self-image. I'm stupid, I can't do this, I'm no good. And that can really start to compound into feelings of shame and then shutting down. And so there can be a lot of impact there for kids, but also students who are really high achieving. Sometimes we forget about them, but they may have a very harsh inner critic that pounces on every single mistake they make. So if they get 96, it's, oh, why didn't I get the 4% right? And that may seem silly, and that may be an emotion that you can't relate to, but that's something that high-performing people often struggle with. And it is equally as debilitating, that sense of perfectionism. Obviously, anybody who has any health issue, whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed, emotional dysregulation often goes hand in hand with many of those situations. People experiencing chemical imbalances. So any of you that are in the grades 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know all about this with hormones. But also I would say that really, given the circumstances that we're all living under, we are all at risk for this sense of our emotions being kind of out of whack. So again, as I said at the beginning to some of the people, I think you'll find that this is something you can apply to many different avenues of your life. All right, so what happens in the brain when it's flooded with emotions? So we know that the back of the brain, the limbic system, the reptilian brain, the oldest part of our human brain. There's a little tiny organ called the amygdala, and that is where your fight, flight, or freeze response becomes activated when you are flooded with emotion. So that part of the brain starts to really light up if we were to do a scan. At the same time, the frontal cortex, the front of the brain where we have reasoning, decision-making, executive function, some language, that starts to shut down. So the back of the brain is taking over, and the front of the brain is kind of going offline. So when people are in this state, their thinking becomes very rigid and inflexible, black and white. Or they get stuck in a circular loop and they're just going over the same ground again and again and again and again, right? When they're in this state, no new learning can take place because we need the front of the brain to learn. And right now, that's not happening. It's not helping us. And unfortunately, at the same time, they have very limited access to any of the tools and knowledge that they had previously. So if you have taught them a lovely breathing exercise or coping mechanism or something, and you're trying to get them to do it while they're flooded with emotion, they can't. They literally can't remember it because those files where that information is stored is offline right now. Back of the brain is taking over, front of the brain is shutting down. So the brain science behind this particular emotional de-escalation technique is that the adult's verbal and nonverbal signals, so what we say, this very specific script that I'm going to give you, and also how we say it, very important, triggers a release of oxytocin. So oxytocin is the chemical in the brain that they call the love hormone, and it's associated with bonding, feeling connected, feeling like someone really gets you. So it is the feeling, it's the chemical that's released when a mother or a father looks at their newborn child. Even when you look into your pet's eyes, you'll get a burst of oxytocin, and the pet will also get a burst of oxytocin, which is really interesting. So anyway, this chemical, very important. It gets released from the hypothalamus, and then it binds to the receptors in the back of the brain, in the limbic system. Once it binds, cortisol, which is the stress hormone, goes down in the body. So oxytocin is released when we feel like somebody gets us, and that there's this feeling of safety and connection. And when that chemical is released, the stress hormone goes down. It also helps to build, oxytocin helps to build neural pathways between the back of the brain and the front of the brain. So it literally starts to create that highway to reason that helps people learn to rationalize even when they're highly activated emotionally. But without that highway and that connection, people can be very, very stuck in the back of their brain. So again, it's a really important chemical for neuroplasticity and building the brain. And so what happens is that we as the adults, we act as temporary co-regulators, emotional co-pilots, if you will, through this emotion coaching process. And we help them literally calm their brain down. And then as they practice this more and more, and that pathway gets built and strengthened, they develop the capacity to do it themselves. So self-regulation happens after the practice with the co-regulation. And in my own family situation, I can tell you that that's exactly what's happened. So I did the emotion coaching with my daughter through many, many, many huge emotional outbursts. And over time, she developed the ability to do it for herself. And so I don't have to keep doing it to the same degree anyway, which is amazing and great. So the rationale behind this is that first and foremost, it avoids escalating the emotion. So I know we've probably all been in that situation where somebody's upset and we say something really trying to be helpful, wanting to help them, but it seems to make it so much worse, right? It's like we've thrown gasoline on the fire and now they're even more emotional, right? So it'll help you avoid doing that. It will bring them down successfully and quickly. and that through that co-regulation over time, they will learn to self-regulate. So we really need to remember that a regulated physiology, a calm brain, is critical for learning. They cannot learn if their brain is in this state. And emotion coaching serves as a bridge to get us there, helps us to help them. Some people wonder, well, why can't they do this on their own? Like other kids seem to be able to, break a pencil and get over it. What is going on here? Why is this person so prone to these big emotional responses? So some kids need more, and actually some adults too, need more co-regulation practice to be able to develop those self-regulation skills, because their amygdala is rapid firing for some people. So for reasons that we don't have time to go into right now, mostly tied to trauma, some people's amygdala is on high alert. So you can imagine it like a smoke detector in your house that's supposed to go off when there's a fire, right? That's what the amygdala is supposed to do. It's supposed to go off when there's something really serious going on. But in this person's case, there's something wrong with the smoke detector, and it goes off over things that are not fires, right? So it is rapid firing. It's got a hair trigger response. They may have fewer oxytocin receptors in their limbic system. So it's the way that their brain is made, they may have fewer receptors for that oxytocin to bind to, so that even when you do the emotion coaching and there is that oxytocin release, it just doesn't get taken up as much as in somebody's brain who has more receptors. They may have diagnosed or undiagnosed conditions that are really impairing the function of their brain. So in my daughter's case, when she was severely underweight, her brain was malnourished, and a malnourished brain cannot act and respond in the same way that a nourished brain will, obviously. For the people that are just joining in, if you could just turn your mute on, that'd be great. Thank you. Turn your microphone off. Or this person who is having these huge emotional outbursts may be a super feeler. Now, super feelers, I was not familiar with them at all until I met Dr. LaFrance, and it turns out that I am a super feeler, and I just didn't know all these years. So super feelers are people who feel emotions very deeply. So where the normal, whatever that means, emotional range might be kind of, here to here, a super feeler is like, off the chart, right? So when they're sad, they're really, really, really sad. When they're happy, they're really, 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 really happy. Everything is in big, big colors. Their emotional radar is very high. So that means that it's like they have antennae, and they can really pick up on the emotions of other people very quickly. And, somebody's microphone is still on.
Bullshit. You fucking do that shit.
Can I just ask?
Friday until 2:30?
I can't.
School division important. Anyone will piss me off.
Somebody, hello? There, we got the person who had their microphone on. Okay. So because of this really sensitive emotional radar, they're very sensitive to perceived threat or dominance. So that means that when you're being assertive, they may perceive it as aggressive and then start to respond as if you're being aggressive, right? And that's tricky because in the classroom, you are the authority, right? And you do need to have things go and have good classroom management and all of that. So if you have a super feeler in your classroom, sometimes they can misinterpret your sense that you're being assertive for being aggressive. So all of this super feeler combo pack is really quite difficult for children to navigate until their brain fully matures around the age of 25. They can really sense that they're different. They know they're different from other people. They can see that other people aren't crying when they break their pencil. And so they can start to really create a negative self-concept, right? Why am I like this? Why am I broken? I just want to be like everybody else. What's the matter with me, right? So this technique of emotion coaching can be very, very helpful for super feelers because it helps them understand that their emotions are okay and that they are not broken. and that they feel things intensely, but they can process them, learn to process them, and be just as happy and healthy as anybody else. And that in time, this ability to really be sensitive to the emotions of others is a gift. It's just, it doesn't feel like a gift when you're 10 or 12 or 16 or 5. All right, so let's move into the actual technique. So step 1 is validating emotions. And I'm going to just see what our starting point is for validating emotions, what we think it is. So let's look at this example, and I'm going to ask you guys to get ready to type in the chat. A child is feeling really scared about going on a field trip to the zoo and says they are not going to get on the bus. No way, right? So you go, okay, gotta validate, right? So you say, I can imagine. Oh, I get it. You might be feeling a bit scared about going to the zoo. There's a word that people want to say next. And I want you guys just to type the word in the chat. It's a 3-letter word. Yeah. No, I understand that you, I understand that you don't want to go on the bus, but it's going to be fine. But everybody's put it in there. We all know this word because this is what we do, right? We go, but no, don't worry, but it's going to be fine. But I'll be with you, but I'll sit beside you, right? But. And in this validation script, we are not going to say but. We are going to strike out the word but from our vocabulary. And it's going to be hard because it's a really ingrained habit. But we are going to replace it. See, I just said but we are going to replace it. And we are going to replace it with because. So instead of saying, I can imagine that you might be feeling a bit scared, but we're going to say, I can imagine that you might feel a bit scared because. And then we're going to fill in a reason why we think they might be a little scared. And because, and we're going to put a second reason, and because, we're going to put a third reason. Now, this tiny adjustment from but to because is huge. Because is actually the word that starts the oxytocin being released. It's the magic word. So I call this script the 3 becauses. So you say, I can understand why you might be feeling, and then whatever it is you think they're feeling, because, and you're going to reason 1. Tina, can I just get you to turn your microphone off? Thanks. And then at the end of your first reason, you are going to probably have a little panic and you're going to think, I don't know, I can't think of another reason. I don't know if I'm doing this right. And I can't imagine what another, I can't do 3. I can only do 1. And you're going to have all of that chaos in your head. And you're just going to take a deep breath and you're going to look at the person that you're talking to. You're going to focus on them. You're not going to think about yourself. You're going to focus on them. And you're going to try to imagine if you were in their shoes, why might you feel this way? What other reason could there be? And then you'll think of it and you go, oh, and because, and you're going to give the second reason, your second guess. And then you're going to get to the end of that second one and you're going to go, I don't know, I can't think of a third one. I don't know how to do this. This is stupid. Why am I even trying this? I want to go back to but. And you're going to have that little panic moment. And then you're just going to take another breath and you're just going to look at that person, really connect with them, put yourself in their shoes, try to imagine, and then you'll get the third because. So it's not a race. It's not, you don't have to say this sentence in under 30 seconds, right? You can take your time and there can be pauses after each because. But don't put in another but, just hold that moment. The reason we need 3 because is You can imagine that the person is, when they're upset or escalated in their emotion, they're up on the 10th floor in a building, right? And you're on the ground floor. And you want to help them, but they're up on the 10th floor and you can't reach them. So you say, I can imagine that you might be feeling a bit scared because you don't go on the bus a lot, and that's a new experience for you, right? That's my first guess. And they go, oh, that is kind of, that's a little bit true. Yeah, you're sort of right. And they come down a little bit, but they're still on the 8th floor. So you still can't reach them. So you have to get another one. And because maybe you're worried about who you're going to have to sit with and who your partner is going to be, right? And they go, oh, yeah, that's sort of true. That's a little bit of what I'm worried about. And they come down a little bit more, but they're still on the 5th floor. And if you stop after 2, they're not all the way down. So you have to think of the third one, some reason. Why don't they want to go on this bus trip? Why don't they want to go to the zoo? And then you think, well, I used to be really afraid of the lions when I was a kid. Maybe that's it, right? So you go, and because maybe there's some animals at the zoo that you're a little bit afraid of and you're not sure that you want to see them, even if they're behind bars. I don't know, right? And they go, oh, yeah, that is true. I don't like the whatever, right? And then they come down to the main floor where you are. And once they're on the ground floor emotionally, the door is like the doors of the elevator open up. And that's the front of the brain coming back online. And now you are on the same level, and now you can offer support. Now you can offer reassurance. Now you can problem solve. Now you can figure out a strategy to help this kid, right? With whatever it is that they're worried about. But if you start offering all of those suggestions when they're still up on the 10th floor, nothing lands. And this is the mistake that I made with my daughter when she was first diagnosed. I read up on anorexia and I started, trying to figure out what was going on. And I was trying to support. So I kept throwing offers, support. What about this? And what about that? I think this might be because your brain is doing this. And like I had all this stuff that I was trying to give her, but she couldn't receive it because I hadn't brought her down emotionally yet, right? So I was jumping over step 1, and step 1 is this validation piece that brings the person down. And I was trying to just get quickly on to step 2, which was helping and supporting. So 7 practical tips. Step 1, validation, this 3 becauses script, is critical to being able to complete step 2, which is support. So don't make the mistake that I made and just keep offering support without putting the validation in front. You have to do validation first. Now, validation has nothing to do with the truth. So this is not agreeing with what the person thinks. So going back to that first example of the kid saying they're a loser, you're not going to agree that they are a loser. You're going to validate that they feel like nobody likes them, which is a very different thing to, yeah, you're right. Actually, there isn't a single child in this whole school that likes you. That's not what you're saying. You're saying that you understand why they feel that way. And maybe you even felt that way one time when you were a kid, right? So that is a very different thing than the truth. So don't get hung up on that piece. You're going to use tentative language. So I'm guessing that you might be feeling, or I can imagine that you might be feeling or might feel, or when I put myself in your shoes, I can just imagine that maybe what you're feeling is, right? So all this language at the first, before you actually get into the becauses, is very tentative and kind of like you're guessing, you're not quite sure, because labeling someone else's emotions with authority is really, really annoying and aggravating, even if you're right. So the difference between someone saying, Sue, you're angry because, I'm like, what? I'm not angry. What are you talking about? Right? Immediately I get defensive. Rather than, Sue, I can imagine that you might be feeling angry because. Then I go, oh, what? I can hear that. I can be open to that, right? So that's really important. You're going to avoid all questions when validating. So remember at the first one, I did the loser example, and a bunch of you were asking what happened, what's going on, what makes you think that, right? It's really natural to want to get to the bottom of something or to figure something out. The problem is that when a person is really upset, their prefrontal cortex is not online. And so they can't, it's not that they can't, sometimes they can't, but mostly it's really difficult to answer questions. It's hard to formulate answers. It's hard to put things into words. And so when you ask a question, you actually risk escalating the emotion because they can't answer you. And now they're frustrated on top of whatever else they're feeling, right? So hold off on the questions until they're calmed down. And then you'll have time to, if you need to sort something out or figure something out. But at first, really just try to bring them down. Now, you may find that you're validating one emotion and it's coming down really nicely, you're doing an awesome job, and then all of a sudden, boom, another emotion pops up, like that whack-a-mole game, maybe some of you. That doesn't mean you did it wrong. It just means that people are very complex and sometimes they feel multiple emotions, right? So you may just have to validate the second emotion, just exactly the way you did with the first. Because there may be a number of things going on. You're going to work towards matching your verbals and nonverbals with the person. So that means that if the person is very quiet and withdrawn, you're probably going to come in quiet and gentle, right? But if a person is very agitated and chucking chairs around, coming in with a really soft and quiet voice. First of all, they may not hear you. And secondly, it may actually be aggravating. So that doesn't mean that when they're yelling, you're yelling, or when they're angry, you're angry. I have a slide on matching anger, and actually there's a beautiful video on it as well. So, but just for now, know that the idea is that you're trying to kind of get into their zone with your tone and your facial expressions, etc. But most importantly, you're going to need to practice this because the but habit is really strong in all of us. So we need to practice using this new language and the three becauses in order for it to literally come out of our mouths naturally. And I suggest trying it on smaller emotions first, lower stakes situations, because you're going to need to build up some comfort with it. And you're also going to need to start to trust it in order to be able to use it in those higher stakes situations. So you can use it on the grocery store person who, it expresses a little bit of, back pain or whatever, a little bit of frustration. Oh yeah, I can really imagine this must be frustrating for you because, right? Or you can use it on your spouse, or you can use it on another colleague who might be taking this class with you. So you can practice together because then it will become more natural. Now, I've used it for so long and so consistently that I don't even really notice that I'm doing it anymore. It's just a habit to respond that way. All right, so let's do a quick little check-in. That's about 45 minutes I've been talking. So I want to kind of hear from you guys, what are some of your concerns at this point? So some of you may be feeling like that little baby monkey there going, I don't know if I want to try this. This sounds a bit weird. Or some of you may be feeling like, you know what, I have a tsunami of wave coming at me in my classroom, and yours is sort of saying these three becauses is gonna hold that back. I'm not sure. So if you want to just type in the chat, we'll do a couple of questions, and then I will. And then I'll go to the next slide, which has a summary of a whole bunch of things that I've heard from a lot of people, right? So the first one here is, what if your because reasons are incorrect, right? So they're always going to be guesses. No matter how good you are, no matter how well you know the person, you're always going to be guessing. So we have to get comfortable with the idea of we may not be right, and that's okay. Because what happens is when you say I said with the zoo thing, well, I can imagine you might be feeling a bit scared because, you don't ride the bus very much, and that's a new experience for you. And then the kid goes, no, that's not it at all. I ride the bus all the time, right? So they're basically telling you that your guess was wrong. That can feel a little unsettling. It's like, oh no, first one out of the gate and I've got it wrong. It's okay because they are actually already communicating with you, right? So something has already happened so that they can actually process language, and then you can say, oh, okay, I see. I used to be afraid of the bus, but I'm glad that's not your situation or whatever. And then you can go, well, maybe it's because, and then you just try again, right? It's okay. It's okay to be wrong. And sometimes they will actually give you a because, right? Which is awesome because now they're actually giving you one of the three. So they go, oh yeah, it's not that, it's this. And you go, oh, right. And you can just mirror that right back to them. So they say, no, it's the, I get sick on the bus, right? I get car sick. Oh yeah, I can understand why that would be really, really scary for you because nobody likes to feel sick on the bus or feel like they might throw up, right? So you're now it's much more of a collaborative thing already. What do you do if your because reasons don't work at all and they stay shut down and won't talk at all? Good. Okay. So sometimes people are very shut down and you can validate silence. So if someone doesn't want to speak to you, is really shutting off, sometimes we can feel like, well, I tried and it didn't work, so I'm just going to leave them alone. But it's really important to validate the fact that they're shut down, if that makes sense. So what that would look like is, I can really understand, I'm guessing that you don't really feel like talking right now to anybody because maybe you're afraid that nobody will understand what you're feeling. And because maybe it feels safer just to say nothing. And because maybe it's really, really hard to put into words what you're feeling, right? So I've just validated that person being shut down and not wanting to talk to me. And that will go in. Somewhere that will go in. And then you can move on to step 2, which is offering the support, even without them saying nothing. You can say, and so I'm guessing what you might need right now is a bit of time and to know that I'm here and my door is open when you want to talk, right? Or whatever it is you think is appropriate, whatever support you think, or maybe there's someone else they'd like to talk to that isn't in the space right now, or whatever you think is going to help them. But it's really important not to give up on people that are shut down because they start to feel like they're completely alone in the world, and they need to know that there is somebody, there is at least one person who sees them, who understands them, who is there for them, and it can be a really important lifeline. So I used this last year with a student who escalated a lot. The interesting thing that happened once was the student said to me, you are making me more upset because it's making me think about it more. Yeah. And that is true, that people often like to avoid emotions and avoid feeling those emotions because it's uncomfortable. But as we learn to go through emotions, we will get more comfortable with them. So yes, it's true that it feels like you're making it worse because you're actually bringing it up and out, but you're actually helping them process it. So emotion goes in a little like this, like a curve. And so what happens is a lot of people, when they feel the emotion coming up like this, they start to get very uncomfortable, very scared, very angry, lots of things. And they look for an exit. They look for a way to get out of that emotion. So for some people, it might be shutting down. There's other people, like, older teens, it might be drugs or alcohol use. In my daughter's case, it was eating disorders. Other people, it can be workaholism, whatever. There's lots of different ways that we as humans have figured out how to get out of that loop. And what happens is that you just end up going back down, and then you go back up again, then you go back down. So you get stuck in this. Whereas if you learn to go up all the way to the top of the emotion, which is very uncomfortable and very painful, there is always, move over, there is always a down. So what's happened is that with this student is they haven't actually gone up and over. So they've just gone up, and then you've made them go up a little bit more, and then they've gone, I don't like this, I want out. What we have to do is help them get up all the way and then go down, because once they realize that there is peace and calm and forgiveness and acceptance and love on the other side coming down, they will stop being so afraid of their own emotions. Can you use this on a whole class? And if I've missed people's questions, please don't be offended. Just make sure you remind me at the end if I haven't already answered the question. So yeah, this is actually a technique that is intended to be used in public. It's not a go out in the classroom and have, or go out in the hallway and have a private conversation, although it can happen there, but it is intended to be used in the classroom. Part of the reason is because remember that thing when I was talking about who else has been affected, the ripples, the bystanders. When somebody has an emotional response, everybody in hearing distance is affected largely to some degree. And so you as the teacher or the EA, as you're co-regulating and bringing this one child down, you're actually co-regulating the whole class, because they're all hearing how to come down. And so it's a really important skill for others to see and to witness, and bystanders to be part of. Just trying to get down a little bit here. See what that one. Restrictions come out, COVID in your classroom tone is different than normal. Could you try to use this to address them all? Yep. Can you use this technique if the child continues to disrupt the class and is very loud? I think if you're finding that this one child is really disrupting the whole class and it's taking longer for them to de-escalate, you could start it with the whole class hearing the three becauses, and then you could move the child out to do the next part. There might be more intensive support that's needed on the other side, and maybe the whole class doesn't need to be part of that. But in terms of getting them calm enough to receive your support, I think.
I mean, checked out. I got in the second time.
Mute that person. And again, in your different situations, you guys are the experts, right? So I would say try it, see how it goes, and adapt it to your specific circumstances, because you are the experts in these children in terms of their background, in terms of the whole classroom dynamic, and in terms of what's reasonable and feasible and what is theoretical or might work in other situations. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide to just show you some of the other concerns that I've heard over the time. And thank you for all those comments. Some people are really worried about this rewarding or appearing to reward or accept bad behavior and saying that it's okay. Some people say, I just don't have time to do this. Like, I am just running, and my pressured life and my classroom is so complex that it's really difficult to imagine carving out time to do this. Some are worried about the negative impact on others. So if I spend time co-regulating this one child, what's happening to the other 22 kids in the class, and how are they being ignored? Some worry that it's going to make it worse. So that's kind of what the one comment was intimating there, that it's going to open up the floodgates, and once they start crying, there's not going to be any end to the crying, or that it's going to make the situation worse. Sometimes people are worried that it looks like I'm agreeing with their negative or incorrect perception. Some people really feel like, I'm here to teach. I'm not here to be a therapist, and I resent having all of these extra duties put on me, and to all of these things, I would say I really understand, and that's why I started the whole thing with talking about the complexity of classrooms, the challenges that you guys have been facing, and the capacity issues that everybody is experiencing right now. And I would say most importantly is that you don't need to do this all the time, right? This is something you can try when you feel you have the capacity to do it, when you feel like you can put yourself in that child's shoes and that it's okay right now for you, you have room, you have space for that level of compassion. Some days we don't have it. That's the truth. And that's okay, right? You don't have to be perfect in this, and you don't have to do it 100% of the time. My responses to some of those concerns is that, again, validating an emotion or perception is not agreeing with it. It's just saying you understand why they might feel that way. The idea is that others in the class will learn, so that when you're co-regulating one, that there is an enormous ripple effect. Children often learn far more by watching what we're doing than listening to what we're saying. So sometimes that modeling can be one of the most impactful moments for them. Sadly, for some kids, they really can't learn without your help in this area, right? So even though you want to be a teacher and you want to be an educational assistant and just focus in on education, they can't get there unless that brain is calmed down enough to learn, right? This intervention will take about 3 minutes, and it shouldn't take any longer than that. So again, it's a well-spent 3 minutes, really worth it. And it's a really valuable skill that you can apply in lots of different situations for your life. If there's a situation, this happens more with parents, I think. It might happen with educational staff as well, but sometimes you're kind of haunted by something where you think, oh, I really didn't do that right, or I wish I'd known this 2 weeks ago or last year. And so you might have something that's niggling at you and thinking, I wish I could do that over again. The nice thing is you can with this script. So I did this in my own situation with my daughter. I didn't know anything about this, the 3 becauses, until she had been ill for quite some time. And so I had been trying and failing spectacularly to help her. And so there was one instance that was really bothering me. And so I sat her down and I said, I'm thinking about that time that, that happened and you did this and I said that and la la la. And I can imagine that in that moment, you must have felt really alone because I was not hearing what you were saying at all, right? And because I was so busy trying to fix the situation that I wasn't able to really understand your pain. And because I was so scared that you weren't going to live, that I was reacting and reacting and reacting. And what you really wanted was just for me to hear you, right? So I had that conversation about something that had happened months and months and years before, and we were able to repair that moment. It was really transformative because in that moment, she could hear that I got it. And so we were able to go back and stitch that relationship back together again. So I know you can learn this skill. I know you can do it because I did it. And I was very set in my ways, right? And again, you don't need to be perfect. We call it the 1% shift. So if you imagine a plane taking off in New York and its destination is London, and the navigation is off by 1%, that plane is not landing in London, right? And it's the same thing for you. If you do a tiny little shift now in your practice, in a year's time, you'll be in a completely different place. And that's certainly what happened to me. So I want to just talk a little bit about the idea of knowing yourself and knowing your own foibles and things that really set you off, because this is really important information for you. So when you look at this list of things, I want you to think about which of these reactions or emotional responses do you find the most challenging? Which ones make you see red, where you think, there's no way I'm going to be able to validate that. I just feel so angry when somebody spits at me, or I just can't, I can't see straight when somebody lies to me, right? Really important to know that about yourself and to know the ones that you kind of go, yeah, actually that one kind of rolls off my back, right? If you work in a team, it can be good to know each other's seeing red points and each other's roll off my back moments, because you might be able to swap out when you're faced with a challenging situation, right? And to know that you're not alone, right? We've all been conditioned to move away from emotion and not to go deeper into it. But research has shown that leaning into an emotion actually supports processing it much more quickly than avoiding it. And the technique itself is really quite simple. Like I say, it's just 3 becauses. It's a very simple script. Our biggest obstacle is going to be ourselves, right? And our own hesitation, biases, and fears of making it worse. So we're going to start out with a bit of self-knowledge. Some of you may already know Dr. Janet Treasure. I don't know, but she developed these very fun animal models to look at 2 things. First of all, how do you respond when someone else is emotional? So what is your general response? And the second thing is, how do you like to support other people who need help, right? So let's look at the emotional response first. How do you respond when somebody else is emotional? On one end of the scale is the jellyfish. So the jellyfish, when they're around somebody that's really upset, they become really upset, right? It's like they have no walls. They become really wobbly. So if you're crying, I'm immediately crying, and they can shift from emotion to emotion quite quickly. So on the other end of the scale for emotions is the ostrich. So the ostrich, when around somebody who's emotional, they just plunk their head in the sand. So it's nope, not seeing it, not dealing with it, not thinking about it, forget it, count me out, right? And it says here they may channel their energy into supporting practically instead. So it's like, I can see you're really upset. I'm going to go fix your toilet for you, right? So very practical. Sometimes jellyfish are married to ostriches. But there is a middle ground between those, and that is the St. Bernard. So the St. Bernard, when confronted with somebody who is, in an avalanche of emotion, they are very warm and very calm and curious, right? So they're in there, they're digging out the snow, and they're like, hey, how's it going? I've got the brandy around my neck. We're going to be all right, right? So very supportive, interested in that emotion, but very calm, and that things are going to be okay and that it's going to get better, right? So if you're a jellyfish, try to be a little bit more St. Bernardy, right? Try to be a little bit more calm and confident that this emotion is going to pass. And if you're an ostrich, try to take your head out of the sand and be a little bit more curious and interested in the emotion, like the St. Bernard. So the next scale was, how do you like to offer support? So what's your go-to strategy for supporting other people? On one end of the scale, we have the kangaroos. The kangaroo sees that the baby roo is in trouble and comes bouncing in there very quickly, picks up the roo, puts it in her pouch, and bounces away quickly. So this approach is really like rushing in to fix, trying to protect from all the challenges, and helping in a really sort of mothering kind of kangaroo-y way. So this can look like love and support, but sometimes it leads to feelings of helplessness and dependence because the roo never has a chance to figure it out on their own, right? And on the other end of the scale is the rhinoceros. So rhinoceros comes charging in there full speed and has lots of advice and lots of direction, and you just come on, just do it. Just let's get on with this. What you need to do is this and this and this, and why aren't you doing it, right? And this approach can lead to defiance, because really none of us like to be told what to do, right? Even if it's great advice, we don't like being told what to do. So in between these 2 styles of support giving, there is the dolphin. So the mother dolphin sometimes swims ahead of the baby dolphin, sometimes swims behind the baby dolphin, sometimes swims beside, sometimes swims underneath and pushes the baby dolphin up to the air. So it's just enough direction and just enough support and following the lead of the other person whenever possible, because this builds a sense of empowerment, right? And sometimes taking charge when it's necessary, because sometimes it is necessary. So again, if you are either end of this spectrum, or if you're married to someone who is in the opposite end of the spectrum, the best thing to do is to try to take a step towards the middle, because that's where you're going to find the sweet spot. So again, which animal are you? And it's good to know yourself. And if you're a jellyfish and you're married to an ostrich, right? That's good knowledge, because sometimes the more one person does it their way, the more the opposite is reinforced in the other person. So this can become a dynamic between parents and teachers. So the more of a rhinoceros you are telling the kid to do this, this, and this, the more I feel the need to protect them as the kangaroo. Right? So it's really good to know who you are and who are the other people around you. All right. So what time are we at? 2:00. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? And then when we come back, we're going to practice some examples, and then we'll see if we have time to go into the breakout rooms again. So let's see what. So we're at 2:08. Let's come back in 5 minutes. So at 2:13. Is that okay? Thumbs up. Alarming to see people eating.
It was breathing, you think? Oh, fine.
Is Debbie on the call? Just wanted to answer some of the questions that were here. Oh, hi, Debbie. Yeah, so your question about using it with people with autism. Yeah, I have had people apply this to kids with various special needs, and they've said it's been quite successful. So I think with kids who have limited language, there's often an additional layer of frustration in not being able to communicate and not being able to articulate what they're feeling. So the feelings and emotions are just this big swirling, ball of mess. And so being able to have another outside person make sense of it or validate it or say, yes, the feeling is, I get it, I understand it, can be enormously helpful. But I would connect with, connect with your other EAs and teachers that work with kids with special needs and autism in particular, and see if you can strategize together how to use this or this or in your setting. And again, the language has to be appropriate to the child. So you may whatever else you're using for assistive technology in terms of communicating, that would have to be implemented into it. That makes sense. But yeah, I have heard that people have had great success with children that they have not been able to find ways before. So that was really rewarding to hear from that one teacher that provided some feedback to me. So I would say give it a whirl, see how it goes. All right, so let's get back to it because I think we're finished at 2:45. So I want to start up again. So we're gonna do some examples here, and I'd like you guys to use the chat to kind of type in your becauses. So we have a situation where someone's saying, it's not fair, she was cheating, she's not following the rules, really upset. And, our first instinct might be to ask questions or figure out what happened, or who is, or let me referee, or I'll problem solve, whatever. And all of those are great ideas. We just have to wait until we validate first. So we're going to use the script. And if you guys can just type in the chat function, I can imagine why you feel frustrated. Because this kid is saying that she's cheating and it's not fair. And I hate this and I don't want to play this game anymore or whatever. So you're going to validate that feeling of frustration. What would the first because be for you? I can imagine why you feel frustrated because you like to win. Yeah, everybody likes to win games, right? Awesome, thank you. And anybody else have another because? Can you imagine why you feel, yeah, because she isn't following the rules. And you want the game to be fair. Perfect. Awesome. So there's 3 becauses right there, right? Because you like to win, because they aren't following the rules, and because you want the game to be fair. Perfect. And then you're going to move on to step 2, which is offering support. Let's go back and practice number 1 again, because step 1 is the hardest part, right? This is so boring. I'm not doing this. Okay, again, in the chat. I can understand why you might feel bored because you already know how to do this, right? Because it's not your favorite subject. Because it doesn't interest you. Yeah. Because you think it'll take a long time. Because we went over this last week. Because you're tired. Because you'd rather be outside playing, right? All those things. Okay, so obviously we know a lot about why people feel bored. Awesome. All right, next one. Okay, this one, a little bit more intensity. I hate them all. They're all laughing at me, followed by swearing, lashing out, maybe, pushing a book off a desk, whatever. Very, very agitated. In this one, I haven't given you the emotion. I've said, I can understand why you might feel. What's this person feeling? What's their What emotion are they feeling? Angry? Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So yeah, anger, embarrassed, right? So let's go with anger. And you can see if you can maybe, Pauline, you can maybe pull a because in that ties into being embarrassed, right? Okay. So I can understand why you might feel angry because you feel alone and scared. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When people are laughing at you, you feel like you're the odd man out, right? You're the outsider because no one stood up for you, right? Because you're feeling picked on, because you feel like no one is on your side. Yeah. Because this happens too often, right? Because you feel alone. Good. Not really your friends. And they're certainly not acting like your friends, right? Yeah. Because they won't listen to you because they're not being kind. Yeah. So what's interesting about anger, with no one to support you? Yeah, these are great. All of them really lovely. What's interesting about anger is that it's often protecting a more vulnerable emotion. So we use anger to push away because we don't want people to see the pain that's underneath the anger, right? So sometimes when you're validating anger, that's why I mentioned you're going to try to approach the same volume and energy so that they can hear you. So what that might look like was, oh, I get why you feel so angry because they're just not listening to you, right? So there's a certain intensity to that as opposed to, I can understand that you feel angry because they're not listening to you, right? Which is very low key. So it's just more about an energy in your stomach, and your gestures are just a little bit more emphatic. But again, I'm not angry. I'm not yelling, right? But there's just a certain intensity behind it. What happens sometimes when you're validating anger, especially with some of those excellent examples that you guys had, is that it may transform into that softer emotion, right? So you may see, if you say something like, yeah, I can understand why you feel so angry because that no one was standing up for you, right? And you may hit the nail right on the head with that. And then something inside goes kunk, right? And you might see a little tear in their eye, or maybe their shoulders drop, or maybe their fists unclench. Just something in the body that says, oh, right? Now I'm not feeling anger. Now I'm feeling something else. So if that happens, you just transform with them and just keep validating what you're seeing, right? As it shifts. So you can say, I can really understand why you're so angry, right? No one was standing up for you. And then you see that change. And because you feel really alone, right? And because they're not acting like your friends at all, right? So I change my tone and my energy and everything to match where they are. At the end, I'll tell you about an excellent video that talks about validating anger because it's a very interesting topic, but I just don't have time to get into all of it, right? So you can validate any emotion at all, or any emotional state, but you can also validate attitudes and perceptions, even if wrong, right? So that, again, you're not validating the truth, you're validating that they feel like everyone hates them, not that everyone really does hate them. You can validate urges, right? So sometimes we get really afraid of even talking about some of these urges because we're afraid that we're going to make them manifest, right? The truth is the urge is there. So you can talk about it or you can pretend it's not happening. But, either way, that kid is going to have to deal with that urge. Far better for them to deal with it with somebody who's an adult who has the skill sets that you guys have, right? And you can validate disruptive behaviors in the classroom. Again, you're not saying it's right. You're saying you understand why they did that and you're bringing them down. And then you're going to talk about consequences and safety and rules and all of that, right? When they can hear you. If you start in with the rules and you start in with the consequences, you're not going to get anywhere because they can't hear you, right? And as I said, you can validate silence. We had that example already about somebody being really shut down, and that we can validate the underlying feelings and emotions that we think they might be going through and why they're choosing to cut themselves off from others. And if you find that there's an emotion or a behavior or something that you're thinking, I can't validate this, like I just hate this. I don't want to validate it, right? These may be the types of things that are on the top part of the tree here. So lying, avoidance, criticism, rejection, acting out, denial, blame, defensiveness. In the world of eating disorders, cutting or self-harm, refusing to eat, whatever. Like these are really hard to validate because they stir up so much emotion in us. This tree diagram is really helpful for that, because what you need to do is think about the roots. Think about what is feeding these behaviors and these attitudes and these things that you can see on the top. What's underneath? Almost always, it's one or more of these 6 things: fear, grief, helplessness, hopelessness, self-blame, and shame. So these are the roots to pretty much all of the behaviors. And if you can tap into the root cause, you will find compassion. So while lying may be really reprehensible to you and really makes you see red, but when you realize that it's tied down deep into a feeling of shame, right? Now you can start to open up and find those 3 becauses. So this diagram I find is really, really helpful, especially if you've got somebody, like maybe you've got a parent that's blaming you for something and you're like, I feel really defensive. I don't like being blamed. This doesn't feel good at all, right? But the root of blame is self-blame, right? So they're blaming themselves, or they're feeling hopeless and helpless, and so they're lashing out with blame, right? But if you can tap in and use the hopeless, helpless, self-blame to generate your 3 becauses, I can understand why you feel so frustrated right now, because it really feels like we're not getting anywhere, right? Hopeless. And because you don't know what to do next to help the situation, helplessness, right? And because it's so hard as a parent to, watch your child struggle, grief, right? So this is a really, really useful little tool. So, hey, you're going, hey, we spent all this time on step 1, and what about step 2? We're almost out of time. Well, here's the good news. Not even need step 2. Sometimes just validating an emotion is the whole enchilada, right? But if you do need to go further and do that step 2, which is providing support, meeting the need underneath that emotion, when the person is calmed down, they can actually help you with that part. They probably have ideas of what would be helpful and what kind of support they need. So now that their brain is calmed down, now you can ask a question. Now you can say, so what do you think needs to happen now? What would help you now? What do you need now, right? So they can become, again, with that mother dolphin, baby dolphin kind of analogy, they can be part of finding the way forward, not just you always having to have all the answers. Because their frontal lobe is back online, you can problem solve together. You can work on a strategy. You can remind them of things that they knew before that worked that you can now implement, right? Because they can remember them. So step 2 is all about meeting the need. Remember that emotion is the flare going up in the night saying, hey, there's something here, you need to pay attention, right? So now we've calmed down the emotion. Now we can find out what was it signaling to us? What was the need? What needs to happen, right? So it's usually a combination of emotional support and practical support that people need, sometimes one, sometimes the other, sometimes both, right? So emotional support, there's just a couple of notes here. I want to remind you guys that sadness calls for comfort. So every emotion has a correct response to that emotion. And sometimes we get our wires crossed, or maybe we're taught things that aren't entirely accurate. So sometimes we think when people are sad, oh, I'll just leave you alone. I'll just let you cry by yourself, right? And that is actually not the correct response. So someone is sad, offer comfort. whatever that looks like. Very different for different people. Some people like to be touched, some people don't, whatever. But know that comfort is the thing that they need. Anger calls for feeling heard. So when you're validating that person and you're bringing down that emotion, there is still something that needs to be said. Doesn't necessarily need to be said with chairs flying all over the place, but there is something that needs to be said, so that you need to find out what is it that needs to be heard. Sometimes you need to create space. This is maybe where somebody actually needs space to calm down, process it, and work it out, or setting boundaries, right? Again, for safety and all of that, you need to think about safety first. Yourself, safety for other kids, for in these dangerous situations. But then once the safety is established, then you can do the de-escalation, and then there maybe needs some boundaries and some safety barriers around these things so that we don't have this happening every day. Shame and anxiety call for reassurance. So shame is a really, really corrosive, horrible emotion that is very destructive. And very different than guilt. So when people feel shame, they don't feel worthy. They don't feel like they deserve to be here. They don't feel like they deserve love. They don't feel like they deserve anybody's help or effort to teach them or help them or anything, right? So shame is really needs to be very carefully attended to with a lot of reassurance that no matter what you've done, you are still lovable. No matter what you've done, you are still worthy, right? And anxiety, the same, requires reassurance that they can face this, that they can do this, that we can get there, right? Whereas fear calls for protection. Sometimes we confuse fear and anxiety, but fear is the thing where there is really a threat.
Difference, I noticed.
Lori, I'm just going to get you to mute there. So if, a bear, a bully, or a bus, that's coming barreling down on a child, we need to protect them. But anxiety, we need to encourage them and reassure them that we can deal with it. Practical supports can look like setting limits, redirecting, exposure, again with anxiety, gentle, incremental exposure to help the person overcome their anxiety, problem solving together, and sometimes taking over. So it really, there's a lot of different ways that we can offer support. Most of us have lots of skills here. Most of us have lots of, professional training in this area. And so that's why I don't spend as much time talking about step 2, because you're usually pretty good at that part. And remember, you can use this for agitated adults as well. So if you have a colleague or a parent or a neighbor or a spouse or somebody that's upset, use exactly the same thing. 3 becauses, right? When you help adults de-escalate, they can be problem solvers with you, right? Again, so if you have an issue where there's conflict around a child and you're the parent, a parent and a principal, say, if you can get them to calm down with the 3 becauses, then you can come onto the same side of the table together to figure out what needs to happen next to support the child, right? You also help them be more responsive to their child's needs. So when you de-escalate them and they are regulated, they go home regulated and able to help their child. Really important, especially with kids who have families who have kids with, a lot of emotional dysfunction or dysregulation or outbursts, whatever. The parents are under a lot of pressure. And so if you can help them calm down, then they will be better able to deal with what they have to do at home. It really increases their inner strength and capacity. You may be teaching them a skill that they've never seen or felt before, and now they can start to apply that to their own kid. As as the parents become more regulated, the child's stressors also decrease, and you should see improved outcomes. So that's why I work so much to support parents, because I really feel it's one of the most effective ways to help kids is actually to help parents. So we do have, what are we at for time here? We have about 15 minutes. So I do want you guys to feel this, because until you feel it, everything I've said is just, talk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you guys into breakout rooms, and except where are my breakout rooms? Oh, that's weird. I don't see, there they are. Okay, breakout rooms. So I'm going to create a whole bunch of breakout rooms, and And what I want you to do is to imagine a time when everybody's leaving. Don't leave now just because there's something to try. Everybody's just panicked. So what you're going to do is you're going to think about a time when you had an emotion. So it's something that is like doesn't have to be really big, just like maybe frustration. Maybe last week you were frustrated with something, and I want you to explain that emotion, just situation, very very quickly to another person in the room with you, and they are going to use the three becauses on you, and you are going to feel what that feels like. And then you're going to swap. Somebody else is going to try. Okay. So it's basically going to be, I'm going to go, hey, my name is Sue. And last week, God, I was just so frustrated with my husband because, he didn't take out the garbage, whatever, something stupid like that. Somebody else is going to go, yeah, I can really understand why you would feel frustrated because. And I just want you to feel it and then practice. Okay. So here you go. You'll have I'll just give you 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe. And then I'll call you all back and we'll talk about it for a few minutes. Okay.
Hi there, Sue. The person that you put me with is not available, I'm
Oh,
guessing.
okay. Well, why don't you and I do it?
Okay. Oh boy. Here we go.
All right. So what's your scenario?
Okay. So, I felt really, I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. I need to think of a scenario.
Do you want to practice on me first?
Pardon me?
You want to do the three becauses on me first, and then
I
I'll.
love that. Thank you.
So let's see. I went up to a cabin to visit my stepfather, and my mom just recently passed away, and it was the first time that I'd been up at the cabin, and it was really hard being there with her not there.
I imagine you felt pretty lonesome for her because you don't get to talk to her every day or, I mean, in person, definitely. Because it was probably really strange to spend time one on one with your stepfather. I imagine maybe you felt kind of unsure about how your new relationship with your stepfather would be like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Perfect. You're a natural.
Oh,
Now I want you to feel it. It doesn't have to be a big thing, small thing, anything. Just something.
okay.
Anything.
I'm feeling really worried about both of my parents have cancer,
Mm,
and so that's been really hard.
yeah. Yeah. I can imagine you feel really, really scared and sad because having both of them sick at the same time must feel like your world is crashing down around you. And because especially having it now in COVID must make it everything so complicated in terms of visiting and
Mhm.
hospitalization and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're never ready to face losing our parents.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's nothing that can really prepare you for it, is there? Like,
No, absolutely not. You know, it's just, yeah, it really doesn't matter what age you are, right? It just is something that is so hard to imagine the world without them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that got real.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's why I like using like real examples from people's lives. Sometimes I used to do it where it was like, you know, a scenario with a kid and stuff. But what happens is then people get all self-conscious about acting. And it's actually not about acting at all, right? It's about listening to the person and about feeling what it
Sorry.
feels like to have somebody actually.
Now I'm back in the main session. Hang on.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm closing all the rooms. You're in the right place. So yeah, so that's what it's like for the kids. That's why I wanted you to feel it because you feel like, oh, what if I guess wrong? And I don't know how to say it. And it's all going to come out weird. And, you know, we have all these kind of hesitations. But in reality,
I'll mute my mic.
mute. In reality, it feels amazing, even when it's bumbly and stumbly and weird, right? So, well, I was just saying with Missy that she didn't have a partner, so she came back and did it with me, and that it's really nice to feel it because sometimes we get so worried about doing it right that we actually don't give it a try. Right? We're afraid to try it. But in the chat, since we don't have a lot of time left, I just want to, if you guys just want to type a little comment about what that was like for you, what it felt like to have somebody respond. Oh, no one was in the breakout room. Well, stick around, Cheryl, and I'll do it with you. And Christine, I'll put the two of you together. Sorry, you should come back to the main room like Missy did. Did anybody feel surprised at how? Yeah, just tell me what it was like. The list of becauses. It was not easy. Yeah, that is honestly the truth, Desiree. It's not easy, and that's why I told you to take your time and to breathe while you're trying to do it. Um, I'll give you one that's kind of a get out of jail for free one that seems to work for almost everything, which is, but don't use it right away. Save it in your back pocket. Is because this is really hard. That's one that seems to work for pretty much any scenario. Yeah. My partner brought something forward that I hadn't even realized I was feeling. Isn't that the truth, Marge? Sometimes other people can see something that um, we don't, and that can be really powerful. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else have any comments about doing this? I don't have a mic. Oh, okay. You could type it in. Yeah. And you can do it by type. Like I've actually done three becauses by text. So you can, you can use it that way as well. Anybody else find it awkward or difficult to think of the reasons? Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I think that's the practice. That's your practice. It's your homework is to, I think it's not that we don't know the reasons. I think it's that we are reluctant to go there. And that's what's holding us back. Okay. So when someone says, when we were doing the situations with the board and all of that, you guys could come up with them quite easily. But when you're looking at a real person, then we start to get self-conscious and we start to second guess ourselves. Well, that can't be it. That's a stupid because, oh, that's not right, you know? And so we weed them out. So it's more about letting yourself just say your guess and just putting your foot out and seeing what happens. Because even if you're wrong, the fact that you've tried will actually build a relationship because the person can see that you're trying, right? The genuineness. Yeah, the more you use the script, the more easy it'll become. Yeah. I think even a wrong because you can get information on what, yes, exactly what I was just saying. Yeah. So it's okay to be wrong. In fact, it's good to be wrong because then they will correct you. Yeah. Awesome. So I think we're just about out of time. I just want to share a last couple of things. So basically the gist of it is that it helps return the person to a receptive mindset where they can actually receive your help, your support, your guidance, your redirection, whatever. It's very compassionate. And I hope you felt that when the person did the 3 becauses with you, that it feels very compassionate. As Missy said, ours got real fast, you know. It works with brain science and it really does strengthen interpersonal relationships. So that's a really wonderful side benefit. Knowing yourself is really important and it can help you leverage your strengths and work on your areas of growth. And it's really adaptable in that you can use it in lots of different scenarios. So some resources for you guys. First of all, my website and my contact information. If you want to send me an email, if there's something that you didn't get or you didn't understand or you'd like more about or whatever, there's information. If you know any parents that might need some family peer support in terms of working with their children, feel free to let them know about that site that I have. And this is, the bottom here is Adele's website. So Mental Health Foundations, with an S.ca, has incredible resources. So if you go under the caregivers tab, that's where you'll find all the stuff on emotion coaching. So feel free to look at that, to watch the videos, and she's got stuff you can download, lots and lots of information there. So Adele is amazing and generous with all of her knowledge and resources. I just want to finish off by saying, be gentle with yourself and give it a try. Give it a try with somebody that you trust and see how it goes for you. And send me an email and let me know if it makes a difference in your classroom. I love hearing the feedback afterwards. When I had one teacher, she did the workshop in the morning and she tried it in the afternoon, and I had an email from her at 3:00 saying, it was amazing. So that was really, really rewarding. So yeah, I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes. If anybody wants to talk about anything, I'm going to stop the recording now.